Right, so self-service data integration. I like to say it's Excel, but not as we know it. Yeah, so as Dan introduced me, I'm a BI data analyst. Firstly, I actually work in financial planning and analysis, so I do have some other responsibilities to do with number crunching. You can find me on Twitter at Lee Hawthorn. I also blog at leehbi.com, and you've got my LinkedIn profile there. Here's my pretty face, taken a few years ago this. Okay, so here's the agenda that we've got. We'll kick off with self-service, fact or fiction. A lot of people, when they hear self-service, they think it's a little bit controversial. What does this mean? So we'll go into a little bit of that. We'll then look at Power Query. We're going to start off at the basics with this. So 101. It's a real interesting tool, especially for Excel users. Once we've got the basics out of the way, we'll take a look at M. M is the power behind Power Query. It's a scripting language. We'll have a look at the future of modern apps. So I'm not really giving you a history lesson on this event, but we do see a bit of a difference with legacy apps versus modern apps. So one of my demos is centered around that. We'll then conclude with some takeaways. There's lots. I think there's an interesting future with Power Query. I'm not privy to what Microsoft's plans are, but it seems like an interesting road ahead. Okay, fact or fiction? Does anyone know what this picture is? Yeah, it's the old Enigma machine. Yeah, it's World War II. Yeah, no, the reason I've got this picture on here essentially is just to illustrate what we've essentially got in business and many different types of data and systems, a lot of legacy apps and some modern. This means there are lots of different problems to solve. In my experience, I've been involved with BI probably over the last 6 or 7 years, and on many occasions where there's a data problem, it's really likely that the requirement will be for a full-on data warehouse with a robust ETL. Yeah, so I'm not disputing that. I don't think anything's changed in that respect. But even in instances where you've got a DW in place, what we often find is the DW doesn't hold all of the data that the analyst needs, especially for a mid-sized business. And that's where my experience is at the moment. Mid-sized businesses have a continuing requirement for change. New data is discovered all of the time. New business activities are formed. New strategies. We're also seeing more recently new advanced analytical techniques. Now, what I'm finding essentially is these, as you do the more advanced statistical analysis, you actually need more finer grained data. It's not so good just referring to the cube. So that's happening. Also, think about the process of extending the cube. Or what about building a new one? We often find a new table in business and we think, I wonder if this data is good enough quality. Problem is, it's got 50 different attributes and we're not quite sure of the value of each attribute. We're not really going to know until after the development's complete. It's a little bit like chicken and egg. Have you ever asked your database developer that you want a different fact granularity in the cube? This is real chunky, heavy work, and it's highly likely that they're going to have a stack of work on their plate already. Now, wouldn't it be great to get to use that data, to live with it for a short period of time? Maybe add it to a data model. Check if it's got the expected value that you think. Well, you can solve the business problem. What about, is it a recurring requirement? Well, if it is, you've then got a rich document to give to the developer. Think of think of it as a prototype. Yeah, I'm not suggesting, I'm not actually recommending that anyone builds their own ETL with Power Query. Yeah, but if you actually just use it just to sample the data and live with for a while, I think that's where it can add value. You know, speaking from my experience as an analyst, sometimes it's like working in a jungle. Right out of nowhere, you can find an opportunity to model a decision or provide some new insight. You're going to have no time to set up a project and change your data warehouse. Now, if the data already exists in the DW, then great, but many times it doesn't exist. Now, in the past, when we had this situation, we used to say, if I only had the data to back up that decision. Yeah, well, now with the modern tools and architectures, we can answer this question differently. Now, you need to be data literate. Now, you might even know how to write a select query from the days when you used to work with Access. Having said this, you do not need to be a T-SQL ninja or an MDX wizard. Self-service DI allows the analyst to solve the problem without stressing out the IT department. Now, what does this mean? Does it mean that we don't need ETL and we can sack our database developers and DBAs? Of course not. In my role, I work closely with DBAs and developers. Their skills are valued very highly. Self-service DI does not replace the need for ETL, just as Power Pivot doesn't replace analysis services. They both work hand in hand. Now, if your developer colleagues accept this way of working, they can work more efficiently and instead of being bombarded with queries from the business every 5 minutes. In my experience, it's a win-win situation. Leave the developers to focus on the hard stuff. Let me talk a little bit about using Power Query in the context of advanced analytics. What we see here is the CRISP DM framework that describes the various stages of analysis. Now, in my experience, the phases of data understanding and preparation takes the most amount of time. Often it's as much as 80%. Now, this can be reduced substantially using Power Query. Now, there are many tools that you can use, but in a minute, I'm going to show you how simple it is with Power Query. Yeah, so let me set up this demo. We're actually promoting a new progressive rock band that we've discovered. Now, before deciding how to market them, we want to measure the popularity of the genre. We're going to use Wikipedia as a data source for this demo. Now, please don't laugh, but I've actually used Wikipedia in a real scenario. Now, I never imagined this would happen a few years ago. Isn't it funny how things change? Now, of course, I'm in no way suggesting that you ask your IT department to factor in a Wikipedia data source into the ETL. You know, but for ad hoc analysis, I think it's okay. So let's open up Excel. Okay, and I've got Power Query installed here, so we're going to go to a web page. So here's the URL that contains the list of the best-selling music artists. Just wait for that page to load. Here we go. So, in fact, tell you what I'll do, just while that works, so I'm going to open up the page itself. Let's have a look at the web page. So yeah, look at all this text. And then we've got a table here, we've got some images. There you go, there's an interesting table. Let's have a look further down. Alright, so multiple tables here. Yeah, now in the days before Power Query, web-based data was a real pain. Did anyone process it? Wasn't it horrible? Yeah, now let's have a look how easy it is now. I'm going to select 3 tables. It's interesting with Power Query because if we hover over, we get a little preview. And we can see the structure of the table, see the columns, just scroll over, just make sure it looks right. Really useful. Essentially, we get an option here to load to the worksheet or load to the data model, which is Power Pivot. Essentially, so let's load that. It's not a huge amount of data this, so it should happen quite quickly. There we go. If I double click that, so we go into the Power Query editor. Do you see what I mean when I said it's Excel but not as we know it? Yeah, it looks nothing like Excel, does it? Look how clean this data is already. We haven't done hardly anything. We've just literally selected the tables we want. Notice we haven't had to filter out any of the images. We've just got the tables. We've focused in just on the data that we want. Now, I just want to talk a little bit about the Power Query interface, just in case this is the first time you've seen it. The main way of navigating Power Query is through the ribbon. It's obvious, but you've also got the icon here. You can right-click. You get various options: use first rows, headers, etc. Merge, append, which we'll come on to in a minute. Yeah, so what we actually want to do before doing some more analysis, we want to combine these tables, you know, and what I'm actually going to do, I'm actually going to append. So let's append the 200 million to 249 million records. There we go. And for this SQL, folks, this is just like a union query, right? Notice we didn't have to type anything. Now, I'm gonna dive into M in the next demo, but I just wanted to show you now something that we can do essentially. If I click on View and go into the Advanced Editor, this is M. What's basically happening is, as we're actually building the data up, these statements are getting generated for us, just like recording VBA in Excel. Just very similar. Yeah, but what we can actually do here, we can amend this data. We can actually hack the code. So if I just can come out of that again for a second, I'm going to go back to Excel. Just going to edit this table. Just rename it. Just to save on the typing. Apply and close. Okay, so if we go back to this one. Although the user interface doesn't offer it, we can actually combine more records. Yeah, so it's essentially I think that works. Yeah, so what we've essentially done now is we've combined those three tables. So I think there's some way for the user interface to go. I would really like to see that append UI give us the option to combine multiple tables. But by amending the M, we can override the UI, which I think is really neat. Okay, so now we've got all the data together. As I'm an accountant, I'm really interested in this number here. There's total certified units. Problem is, it's surrounded by a lot of text at the minute. I'm going to model this a bit later on, so I just want the number. But look how easy this is to clean. What we need to do essentially is split the column. So you see here we've got the option to split column. I'm going to split it by a delimiter. I need to do this in a couple of stages, so bear with me. First, what we need to do is use a semicolon. We're going to split it here at the leftmost delimiter. Let's try that again. It's really interesting. Hold on. Okay. I don't know if you can see on your screens there, but we've actually got a little space just before the number. So what I need to do is transform that. I'm going to trim it. Look at all these nice options we've got. Do you remember, I'm not sure if you remember or you have some experience of Excel, but using Excel, we'd have to type these functions in, whereas now we can just select trim. There you go, so that's trimmed. I can split it once more. This time I need a space. So we're going to split it there. It's at the leftmost delimiter. There we go. So look at that. Power Query's automatically set the data type to a number. What we can do now, we can discard these columns. Because this is a procedural thing. I'm not sure if you've noticed here on the right hand side these applied steps. What's essentially been happening is each time I carry out a process, the M code gets created and a stage is created here. So I'm not sure if I mentioned, but this M code is repeatable. This is one of the real benefits of Power Query. We can shape this data how we want. And if, let's say, this data changes, imagine we're getting the latest view of the record sales. Well, we can just repeat the script essentially. We don't have to do everything I'm doing here. Just literally have to just refresh, and all these steps will be carried out in order. So let's remove. We're only really interested in this key data. So I think that's okay. That I reckon. Tell you what, I'll rename this. Call it sales. Apply and close. Let's go to the model. Yeah, so here it is. Just create a quick pivot table. Sort it, quick sort. Apply a quick. There we go. Now the genre I was interested in was all progressive rock. Yeah, so 114.5 million. That's not bad. I think we'll promote these guys. What do you think? So I hope that was interesting. That's the first demo. let's get back to the slides. Yeah, so I gave you a quick look at M there. I'm not sure if that's the first time you've seen it. As I mentioned, M is generated for each action that you take. Now you can learn about M just by observing this as it plays out. I'm not sure if anyone learns Excel VBA the way I did, and that was basically recording a macro and taking a look at the code. Of course, you always have to recode or tune what was generated, but it's a real interesting learning environment. I really recommend you learn M. I'm actually looking forward to Chris Webb's book, which I think is being released in June. Until then, there is a great amount of material on the Microsoft site. Should we have a quick look at that? Not sure if you've seen this. Yeah, so it's this link. I'm going to include these links in the slide deck, so you'll be able to refer to these. But this essentially learn all about Power Query formulas. And the thing that I'm particularly interested in is the Power Query formula categories. Yeah, so this is a real good piece of documentation. This lists each of the functions, each of the M functions, and if you click on them, it'll basically show you some sample code. So yeah, when I said earlier I'm not sure where Power Query is going, I think it's a lot more than just a data cleaning tool, judging by these lists of functions. And if you get a spare half an hour, you have some fun reading these. Yeah, so the real benefit of M, I think, is the fact that you can hack it yourself, just as I did just before. I appended the two tables, but then just as easily I could just attach a third table. In fact, I've done 9 tables. Yeah, I had a real problem a while ago where I had this fragmented data, in different files. I needed to group all this or union the data together. I didn't have to click append each time. I just hacked it with M. And then as you continue to use the UI then to shape that data, there are no problems. You can just it just picks up from where you left. Really powerful. Yeah, so it does make me wonder where Power Query is going. We can almost see Excel being recreated in the front of our eyes. Now there are many overlaps, like we see here with the text functions. Some text range, very similar to mid. Text end is right. But consider something like table.join. Yeah, or table.unpivot. This is my favourite function in M. Now, for those Excel users there, what we did untraditionally, we would have constructed a pivot table to reshape data. But look what we can do with Power Query. We can just write table unpivot. How easy is that? Another example is table distinct. This removes duplicate rows from the table. It's just like applying an advanced filter in Excel. That's quite a messy filter operation. It's replaced by one function. Yeah, so you can tell I'm excited by M. Yeah, now, I actually want to show something that's a bit more modern or indicative of the future. I touched on legacy apps a little bit earlier. Now, there are a lot of legacy apps in business, but we're also seeing the emergence of more modern business apps. And I think the way SaaS is going, I think we're going to see an acceleration in the move away from those sticky legacy apps. And this is going to impact us all in some way, but don't hide from it. Everything is really up for grabs. Yeah, so in this demo I'm going to give shortly, we've spotted an opportunity to improve the demand forecasting. But to check that model, we need to query our corporate performance management system. I need to give a big shout out to my friends at Adaptive Insights. They provided me with a fully featured demo instance that I'm going to use here. Now, I've included the Adaptive Suite because this is an example of a modern cloud-based business app. It's a real app with real data. I'm going to demonstrate how we can query that data even though the app is in the cloud and there's no DBA on hand. Adaptive Insights provide a leading-edge CPM system covering functions such as planning, reporting, as well as consolidation and BI. Now, the Adaptive Suite is some of the most, in my experience, it really is the most usable, intuitive piece of business software that I've experienced, and it does set the benchmark for others to reach. Now, I can't think of another example that shows the technical barrier being lowered to a point that technically literate business people can do things that were previously involved calling IT. Now, I know I'm getting older, but things really are getting easier at a faster pace than ever. Consider Power Pivot and analysis services. What about Power Query and SSIS? Now, there will always be a place for developer tools, but these business tools let us, the analysts, solve problems in a different way than before. Let's consider APIs here that were previously used by developers to query and update the app. Now, with modern tools like Power Query, we can actually use these same APIs without having to call IT. Yeah, and we can do it using these 4 functions. Now, it's not a lot to learn, and quite frankly, if I think back to some of the spreadsheets I've seen people offer, 20 or 30 formulas or 50 lines of code, we can replace these with 4 functions. Now, before Power Query was around, I actually used to write XPath code in VBA to query the XML data, and it really wasn't a nice experience. And I'm convinced I lost hair during that episode. Well, there's no need to worry about that anymore. It's quite possible Power Query uses XPath behind the scenes, but there's no need for us to worry about it. Should we look at a demo? Just close that book. Okay, so now I've already executed this query. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to go straight into the window. We're going to go straight into the M editor. Let me talk you through this. What we're seeing here are those 4 functions that I listed on the slide. So source, this is just the object essentially where we're going to load the data to. And because we're calling XML data, that's why we need XML tables. Now web contents, that's what we used earlier when we call a Wikipedia page. But this time we're actually calling the adaptive planning site. This is the API address for the business app. Now what's interesting here with this function web contents, if we actually add a content parameter here, what we can actually do is, instead of just getting the web page, we can actually post data to it. That's what makes this work essentially. So what we've got here is the API. This is the query code essentially that we're going to send to the Adaptive Insights suite. I won't go into that because I don't think you need to understand that. It's going to be different for every app that you use. But essentially what's going to happen when that gets executed is it's going to return some XML to us, but within that XML file there's going to be a CSV document. So we need to use this function csv.document, and then we send the source output into it. So if this is the first time you've seen this type of code, it does look a little frightening, I have to admit. But this, like I said earlier, is much, much easier than writing XPath. Right, so let's run that. Just to prove that it works, I'll just refresh the data. Yeah, so as quick as that, we've gone out to the website and we've had this data set returned. Now look at it, still needs a little bit of tidying up. You know, and what we can do, even though I literally typed that M code in myself, but even though I've typed it in, I can still come back to the UI now and start to clean this data. So use first row as headers. Brilliant. There we go. We've got the time periods here as columns. That's not good. I'm going to need to unpivot that. If we just select the columns we wish to unpivot, all you have to do is just click on the function name, unpivot. There we go. Let's rename that. Notice the data type is text at the minute. Looks a bit like text, doesn't it? Let's change it. How smart is that? Let's load it to the data model. There's our data. So I don't actually want to talk any more about Power Pivot in this instance. I really wanted just to focus in on how easy that was to get the data, even though the app's in the cloud. Now, APIs aren't really designed for business users to use. If you're not too au fait with the API, you know, speak to your developer, speak to IT, because they'll be able to talk you through it. Still, I think even with that, it's much better than asking them to write the code. So, got some takeaways for you. Pre-order Chris Webb's book. I think it's coming out in June in the US. I think it's not coming out until August in the UK. I think I'll be ordering from Amazon.com there. I've got the link here for the Microsoft site. Learn about Power Query formulas. I really recommend you have a look at that. If anyone wants to tell me where Power Query is going, I'll be really interested. Also, I've recently started a YouTube channel for data analytics. I've got some Power Query and Power BI videos on there. Also, you've got to recommend Chris Webb's blog. He's one of the most prolific bloggers that I know. Hats off to him. You can learn a lot just by reading his blog. Yeah, so that's all I have to demonstrate. So I'd really like to take any questions that you've got.
All right, Lee, thank you very much for that great presentation and covering Power Query and going over the M language. That was all great stuff. We do have a couple of good questions here. We've got one, the first one that I have here is, and I believe it is in regards to when you were doing that append functionality. Mm-hmm. The question was, does the manual update of the M code get included in the history? And I believe they're referring to that applied steps, like how you can kind of see the history of all the steps that you've gone through.
Yeah, it's, I've still got that open. I think I have. what we can actually do with it's a little bit more advanced, this. What we can do essentially is, as we say source equals, it actually creates an applied step, in here. So you can nest a lot of functions together, but I think it depends on how you code the M. And what I've done in a lot of my M code is I've separated it out, into separate let statements, because then it does actually create these applied steps then. So yeah, you can very quickly reverse back through them. But I think to answer the question, the way I coded it just before, I don't think that would have created a step.
Yeah, I don't think it would have created an additional step.
No, because I just modified the function.
Yeah.
I could have separated it out into a different, pointed it to a different variable. That would have created the step.
Okay. Another question here, and I believe I might have a little add to this, but the question is there a way to automate downloads using Power Query? And I think when they mean automate, they're talking about, is there a way to automatically refresh the Power Query without any manual intervention?
Yeah, now, one thing I haven't gone into is this thing here. Because what we can do, I understand, if we can publish this data into Office 365 Power BI.
Yep.
Again, I'm not fully au fait with it because I do have an Office 365 subscription, but I didn't decide to punt for Power BI. I think it's an extra 20 quid a month. So yeah, I can't talk a great deal about that, but I believe it is possible to refresh once it's been published. Auto refresh.
Yeah, so I don't
think we can do it from the desktop. Don't think we can do it from the desktop. You have to publish it.
Correct. Yeah, I think once it's in the Power BI and Office 365, they can do the scheduled refresh.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay, here's a good one. It's kind of putting you on the spot, but can you recommend some good public big data sites so that we can play around with this? I know the UK does have a lot of open data, correct?
Yeah. Bear with me a second. I'm trying to remember if I had a... Yeah, no, I haven't got the link to hand. There are various sites now. I think if you look at KD Nuggets, this is a data mining analytics site. You will find people referring to big data sets on here. Let's see if we can find it. Data sets and data markets. Yeah, here you go. Data sets for data mining, data science. Don't be put off by data science. Don't think you need to be a scientist to do this stuff. But you can see here some big data repositories.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, kdnuggets.com. It's a great resource.
Great. Yeah, no, another one, I don't know if it's big data. I mean, depends on your definition of big data, but I've used gapminder.org. That was another one.
Yeah.
I know there's a bunch of them out there. I don't know if anyone has a nice complete list. I don't know, maybe Chris will have some in his book. Just had another one, another gentleman was just saying that he's a programmer and he's going to be sending some XML requests and getting some responses with Power Query, so I think he's looking excited to using this new technology.
Yeah, I wasn't joking, when I said I used to write XPath. You're probably familiar with that.
Yep.
Oh, horrible, horrible. Lots of backslashes. Yeah. Oh, and because I'm a bit of a hacker, right? I'm not a professional developer. Professional developer probably finds it easy, but yeah, I much prefer those four functions. Gives you an idea of where things are going. Really interesting. A lot of this complexities is hidden or taken care of for us.
Yeah. So once again, someone said it's easy for the power user, really easy for the programmer. So.
Yeah.
So I think that's it for the questions that we currently have, unless anyone else has any other questions that they would like to ask Lee here. Now is your chance. Otherwise, I think you've answered them all.
Yeah, just pop those links back up there. Yeah, I'm assuming that I'm not sure if the slides are going to be sent out.
Yeah, we'll post the slides on our site if you want to send them to us. We'll get those posted, and then we will get this recording also posted on our YouTube Past BAVC channel. So that'll get posted here within the next week as well. And we'll send out an update with that, as well as for our next presenter in June. Going over data visualizations with reporting services. And yeah, I would like to say in regards to Chris Webb's blog, he's got great content on Power Query. His book will be coming out in regards to Power Query. Another great site is the Power BI team itself on the MSDN. They have a great blog. They just released an update for Power Query here. So there's a lot of new functionality that's available that you can download as well. So. Well, thank you very much, Lee. Do you have any parting words, words of wisdom, advice for our new adventure here?
Yeah, no. Well, I'd like to thank PASS for organising this and giving me opportunity to speak. It's always good to practice public speaking skills, even though I'm tucked away in my study here and it's very dark outside. No, so I do appreciate the opportunity. And what I would say to everybody listening is stay curious. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Lee. Thanks, everyone, for attending. Have a great night or good morning. Take care. Bye.